In the romanticized world of Western movies, survival on the frontier was all about a fast gun, a brave spirit, and a little luck. But the truth written in the trailside graves is far more brutal. 9 out of 10 pioneers who died on the great Western trails weren't killed by a hostile arrow or an outlaw's bullet. They were killed by something invisible, disease. The real frontier wasn't a world of dramatic duels. It was a grueling, meticulous challenge of logistics, sanitation, and sheer luck against microscopic killers. We've all seen the famous scenes: the lightning-fast draw, the hero stuck in quicksand, the cowboy drinking his last rationed sip of water. Today, we're going to walk you through the 9 most common Wild West survival myths that would have led to a guaranteed failure or certain death. These are the lethal fantasies passed down by dime novels in Hollywood that tragically substituted common sense for dangerous vanity. You'll learn why the one thing a desperate pioneer should never do in a gunfight is try to be fast, and why the frontier medical advice of the day was an active death sentence. The Six-Gun Fallacies. Hollywood has made the gunfight the centerpiece of the Old West, but the mechanics of 19th century weapons made those cinematic showdowns virtually impossible. Myth 1, the Quick-Draw Folly. The romanticized image of the high noon duel with a fast draw from a custom-made low-slung holster is a complete movie invention. It simply didn't exist in the historical period. The truth is, the vast majority of people killed by a gun between 1866 and 1900 died in profoundly chaotic situations: saloon brawls, drunken disputes, or cold-blooded ambushes. You were statistically far more likely to be shot in the back than in a structured, fair fight. The constraint was mechanical. The dominant sidearm was a single-action revolver, which required the hammer to be manually cocked before every single shot. If you rushed your draw, prioritizing speed over this critical cocking and aiming sequence, your shot would inevitably be wildly off target. Successful gunfighters like Wyatt Earp were only described as fairly fast, but they understood the ultimate rule: fast is fine, accurate is final. The man who died wasn't marginally slower. He was the man who missed his incapacitating shot. The quick draw myth encouraged pioneers to value theatrical performance over effective, controlled marksmanship. Myth 2, fanning the hammer for rapid fire. This is the classic cinematic technique. The shooter holds the trigger and rapidly slaps the hammer back with their free hand. It looks slick on the screen, but it was a quick ticket to disaster on the frontier. Fanning a single-action revolver subjects the crucial internal mechanisms, the gears that turn the cylinder, to intense, damaging stress. Without expensive, special modifications, the weapon was highly prone to complete system failure. Beyond the breakdown, the technique is profoundly inaccurate, resulting in a chaotic spray of bullets that failed to hit the intended target even at very close range. The pioneer who fanned their hammer guaranteed a loss of all accuracy and risked their weapon breaking mid-fight. A perfect example is former Texas Ranger Bass Outlaw, who modified his Colt to allow for fanning. In a drunken confrontation in 1894, he fired several shots rapidly and managed to hit his target, Constable John Selman, only in the leg. Selman, using a controlled, accurate shot, returned fire, proving fatal to Outlaw. The deadly diagnosis. Frontier medical knowledge was often centuries out of date, adhering to archaic, dangerous dogmas that actively promoted infection. Myth 3, the fatal philosophy of laudable pus. For centuries, a powerful, lethal medical thought prevailed. The formation of thick, whitish-yellow pus in a wound, referred to as laudable pus, was a desirable sign. Practitioners believed it meant the wound was successfully cleansing and healing itself. This was a disastrous surgical error. Pus is an accumulation of dead white blood cells and prolific, dangerous bacteria. By viewing this discharge as positive, frontier doctors and lay practitioners alike failed to engage in aggressive wound cleansing and sterilization. This dogma ensured the unchecked growth of bacteria and guaranteed the rapid onset of systemic blood poisoning or sepsis and tissue necrosis. The patient was tragically encouraged to harbor the very infection that would kill them. The historical failure here was not a lack of technology, but the persistence of a 600-year-old lethal dogma. If you're finding this deep dive into the real, unromanticized history of the Old West as fascinating as we are, and you appreciate the time we take to research these lesser-known critical details, please take a moment to hit the like button. It's the best way you can tell the platform you want to see more honest history like this, and it helps us keep delivering new stories about the American frontier to this channel. And while you're at it, mosey on over and subscribe so you don't miss our next video. We sure enjoy reading the comments and hearing your take on these myths, so drop a line below. Bonus myth: cutting and sucking snake bites. The belief that you should cut the wound or attempt to suck out the venom is a common folk remedy that is both ineffective and hazardous. Venom rapidly enters the body's lymphatic system, meaning removal by excision or suction is negligible. Furthermore, introducing new bacteria via an incision or the mouth dramatically increases the risk of a fatal secondary infection, regardless of the toxicity of the initial venom. The untamed wilderness. The wilderness required counterintuitive responses that often went against basic human instinct, a fatal discrepancy exploited by the environment itself. Myth 4: struggling in quicksand. Cinematic depictions often show victims being rapidly sucked beneath the surface, necessitating frantic, immediate struggling to escape. This instinctual panic response is the scientifically guaranteed method for deep entrapment. Quicksand is far denser than the human body, and once you are submerged to about waist depth, you will float. You cannot be pulled completely under. However, your movement applies mechanical stress, causing the quicksand to liquefy, making you sink deeper. When a foot is trapped, freeing just one leg requires an enormous force, the equivalent of lifting a small car. Death does not come from vanishing beneath the surface, but from fatal exhaustion, environmental exposure, or drowning if you are immobilized during a rising tide. Survival depends entirely on mastering the counterintuitive action of slowly spreading your weight to increase buoyancy and carefully introducing water around the trapped limb to reduce friction. Myth 5: running from a grizzly bear. When charged by a bear, the instinctive myth is that escape is possible by running away. This instinct is a rapid pathway to death. Bears, especially the grizzly, possess explosive speed, capable of running as fast as a racehorse over short distances, exceeding the speed of the fastest human even uphill. Running instantly triggers the bear's innate chase response, escalating a non-lethal encounter into a full-scale lethal pursuit. The critical factor is distinguishing a bluff charge, a defensive warning where the bear often stops short, from an actual attack. The survival failure is behavioral, misinterpreting warning signals as an immediate threat and responding with flight, which guarantees pursuit. The correct counterintuitive response is never to run, but to stand your ground, attempt to appear non-threatening, and deploy deterrence. The pioneer miscalculations. Pioneers often failed not against external conflicts, but against internal, self-inflicted systemic errors in logistics and health management. Myth 6: the lethal lie of water rationing. The common wisdom suggests that spreading a limited water supply thinly over time is the best strategy for prolonging survival when resources are scarce. This is a fatal mistake. Water's most immediate survival function is maintaining cognitive capacity. Dehydration rapidly induces confusion, dizziness, fatigue, and critical impairment of judgment. By strictly rationing water, the pioneer guarantees the degradation of their mental ability, fundamentally undermining their capacity to perform necessary survival tasks, such as finding more water or navigating effectively. The rationale for rationing prioritizes the preservation of the physical inventory over the functionality of the operator. Survival experts emphasize that maintaining cognitive function by drinking water when you are thirsty is paramount. Dehydration is an acute danger that kills by inducing mistakes and incapacitation long before total organ failure sets in. Myth 7: the Indian War is the primary threat. Wagon trains allocated significant resources toward armed defense, believing indigenous conflict represented the greatest threat to life on the trail. This was a fatal misallocation of effort. The statistical reality of the Oregon Trail and other major routes provides a profound corrective. The overwhelming majority of pioneer deaths were caused by disease. 9 out of 10 pioneers who died on the trail succumbed to serious illnesses. Cholera was a main scourge, capable of striking a perfectly healthy person at breakfast and putting them in their grave by noon. In addition to disease, mechanical accidents posed an exponentially greater risk than conflict. Being crushed by wagon wheels was the single most frequent cause of injury or death, followed closely by accidental firearm discharges. This myth perpetuated a fatal misallocation of effort. Fear of a visible external enemy drove strategy, leading to the systemic neglect of the invisible, yet far more pervasive killer, microbiology. Survival demanded the enforcement of stringent organizational rules for sanitation and waste management, not acts of martial heroism. Myth 8. Unloaded safety, accidental firearm fatalities. The belief was that tactical readiness necessitated keeping firearms loaded and ready at all times. The single-action mechanism, which often rested the hammer directly on a live round unless deliberately secured, created a high-risk scenario. The analysis of trail fatalities consistently finds that accidental firearm discharge was the second leading cause of emigrant injury and death. This often included tragic incidents where travelers were handling firearms muzzle first. The unsprung bouncing wagon was an inherently unsafe environment for loaded weapons. Pioneers focused on the dramatic preparedness required for an unlikely confrontation, ignoring the high statistical probability that their own weapon would kill a family member through negligence. This represents a fatal trade-off, a marginal tactical benefit for external defense exchanged for massive internal risk. The safer strategy was to keep rifles unloaded and securely stowed. Myth 9. The minimal shelter. Believing that erecting a quick structural frame, such as a simple lean-to, provides sufficient protection to survive exposure. A shelter's primary function is not structural integrity, but thermodynamics, specifically, the prevention of convective and conductive heat loss, which leads rapidly to fatal hypothermia. The minimalist structure fails completely to address the critical need for insulation. A functional survival brush shelter requires at least 2 feet of dense insulating debris, leaves, pine needles, or grasses, piled not only on the exterior walls, but critically, also on the ground as bedding. This thick layer is necessary to trap body heat and prevent fatal conductive heat transfer to the cold earth. A pioneer who focuses only on erecting the framework or relies on a single thin blanket will rapidly lose core temperature, inducing confusion, fatigue, and fatal hypothermia much faster than starvation or dehydration might. The common survival error is prioritizing the form of the shelter, a strong structure, over its essential function, thermal efficiency. If you were a pioneer traveling the Oregon Trail, which myth do you think would have been the hardest for you to abandon? Would you have been able to overcome the instinct to run from a grizzly, or the impulse to ration that precious water? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more unvarnished history. If you like this video, be sure to check out some more history we've covered, like the one in the top left corner.